Welcome our listeners and everyone who is watching this channel. We are interviewing here Dr. Dan Schueftan, who is a famous Israeli scholar focused on the history of Israel, relationships of Israel with neighboring countries, with geopolitics related to Israel, and he has published many books. You can all find it on the internet and Google his name if you are interested more deeply about his work and his activities. He just told us that he has been in Prague quite frequently, and he visited Prague frequently. He likes it here, and obviously we would focus mainly on everything which is related to current security situation in Israel and about the war in Gaza and the overall security situation in the Middle East, but not only in the Middle East. So once again, my name is Jan Macháček. I am chairman of the board of the Institute for Politics and Society. Štěpán Hobza is a reporter of Lidové noviny. I also write columns for Lidové noviny. And welcome, Mr. Schueftan, and Štěpán would ask first questions and I would join. Okay, thank you.
So I will start with some news then, if you allow me, and then we can dig deeper into the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, obviously, but let's start with what's actually on the table right now. So, if I may, it has recently surfaced that the UNRWA workers, the UN agency workers, were actually directly involved in the attacks of the 7th of October. Is it really surprising, or what's your take on that?
Nothing negative about the United Nations can be surprising, because there is something profoundly wrong with this organization, because it is based on majority vote. Regimes are represented there, and the majority of regimes in the world are autocratic or dictatorial or barbarian. So do we have civilized people? Yes, the Europeans, the Americans, the Australians, the Japanese, what have you, Israel. But the majority is, of course, the kind of people that you don't want to associate with the kind of values that we cherish, pluralism and so on. And yet, these people define democracy and define human rights in a way that is ridiculous. I mean, you look at the Human Rights Council there and you ask yourself, what kind of nations can be represented there when you have so many barbaric nations? I don't know, North Korea, Libya, Syria, whatever you... So the fact that in the Gaza Strip, UNRWA is a profoundly distorted organization starts with the assumption that every refugee in the world deserves assistance for 2 years and then needs to be resettled, but Palestinians will have it forever. We're speaking about the 4th generation, the 5th generation, and it is dominated by Hamas. Mm-hmm. So nobody, when you are among barbarians, and Hamas and Hezbollah and others are barbarians by every standard that you can possibly imagine, and when you live among them, you accept their dictates or they kill you. So anything international that is involved with the barbarians and depends on the barbarians becomes barbarian. It is, there is no other way. Mm-hmm. And one of the reasons that the Palestinian people have behaved in such an irresponsible way and constantly were only focusing on violence and whining is the fact that no matter what they do, they always get assistance. So they can behave like barbarians in the massacre of the 7th of October, and they get billions of dollars from all over the world, and the President of the United States gets up in the morning and asks himself, what can I do for the Palestinians? So why would they become responsible? This is an irresponsible people, because if there are no consequences to barbaric behavior, then you can't develop responsibility. So it goes beyond UNRWA, it goes to the overall picture. You have a people established, created about 100 years ago, and for 100 years, the Palestinians have done nothing constructive in terms of building their own society. I mean, having, I don't know, a better economy, a stronger culture, a more diverse political system, anything, health, whatever, because they could focus only on terrorism and whining about the consequences of everything that they have done. Now, they used to have a prime minister, Salam Fayyad, I spoke to him only a few days ago, who is an impressive human being, a nation builder, the best thing that could have happened to the Palestinians, and the Americans made him prime minister by giving $500 million. But even when he was prime minister, he never had more than 2% support among the Palestinians. Because he's a nation builder, he cannot represent the Palestinians. And the people who do represent the Palestinians, like the pro-Nazi Mufti of Jerusalem, and then the barbaric terrorist Arafat, and then this lowlife today, Abu Mazen, you should listen to his speech in August. It's August 23. Unbelievable, you know, denying the existence of a Jewish people, and the really ridiculous, barbaric, stupid lowlife. And this is the kind of people that represent them. And if you look at their role models, their only role model is somebody who killed Jews. And the more Jews you kill, the more respected you are. And the more Jews you kill, the more money you get from the Palestinian Authority. And I think the root of all that is that they have never been forced to be responsible by bearing the consequences of what they have done. For instance, in the Gaza Strip, after the 7th of October, you had a standard of living that was higher than in Egypt. I mean, everybody spoke about how the Palestinians were suffering. I don't know if Google Earth still has the reality before the 7th of October. Take a tour in Gaza. So why should the Gazans get billions of dollars from humanitarian aid, invest every penny of it in weapons and in tunnels and in oppression of their own people, and then everybody gets up in the morning and says, oh, what about the Palestinians? So we Israelis are already used to it. But you asked me if I'm surprised? No way.
If you raise this in Europe, usually they will tell you, well, we know that UNRWA is far from perfect, we know that, but it's actually
far from perfect.
I know, this is what they will tell you.
Jack the Ripper is far from perfect as a humanitarian. Not far from perfect, profoundly distorted, prostituted.
I'm just playing the devil's advocate as a journalist. They will tell you it's actually our only means to support Palestine. What's your
Why would you support people who want to kill somebody else and are not trying to build their own society? If UNRWA gives them food so they can take all the money they have from UNRWA and from humanitarian help and other things in order to kill other people and oppress their own people, why should you care for them more than others? Why do they deserve more than anybody else just because they're barbarians? Okay, look, people want to do it. I can't stop them. The only thing is, I can have no respect whatsoever for an argument that is so stupid that if you are not an idiot, you don't accept it. I mean, if people want to be idiots, this is their human right. The desire to be stupid is A, very popular, and B, I can't do anything about it. You want to cheat yourself? Cheat yourself. If that makes you happy, go ahead.
May I, just one last question. You have recently said, or recently, in the past you said that the American approach to these problems is always operational. They try to find solution, right? Whereas what you need in Gaza and in Israel is actually the strategic thinking, right? the approach to the problems that have no solution.
So let me repeat it. You quoted correctly what I'm saying for a very long period of time, that not only Americans, we Israelis have the same problem. We have people who are very, very good on the operational level, and they think like engineers. Here is a problem, what is the solution? Now, I like this approach with engineers. I want engineers to find solution to a problem. They can say, here is a gap, let's build a bridge. How much concrete, how many nuts and bolts, how much steel, and we'll build a bridge. Human problems very often don't have solutions. For instance, crime doesn't have a solution. Human nature dictates that crime will always be there, but you can find a response that will do damage control. If you have a good law enforcement system, then you can bring crime from an unacceptable level to an acceptable level. Poverty doesn't have a solution. But if you have a good welfare state, a well-functioning welfare state, you can bring poverty down from an unacceptable level to an acceptable level. If people ask after Gaza, the Americans come to us and say, what is your end game in Gaza? Tell us what your end game is. What is the solution? I tell the Americans, you know, you are great with solutions. You always have an end game. For instance, you have an end game of bringing democracy to Iraq, and an end game of bringing women's rights to Afghanistan. And look how beautifully you managed to get your end game. So don't come with us with this joke of how do you solve the problem. You cannot change the political culture of the Palestinians by coming to them and giving them billions of dollars. By the way, also not by killing people. You can't change a culture unless people want to change their culture, unless they want to say, we want to have the respect that we have to ourselves and others have to us by being nation builders, by using somebody like Salam Fayyad as a leader who would direct them into having a better life for their children, and not a constant confrontation that they're losing for 100 years. If they would have won, I may not have liked the outcome, but they're losing and they will continue to lose. So they have the fantasy that they can win it. They will try, we will prevent them, if necessary, by force. And when the Americans come with their shallow approach, Americans are, with exceptions, Kissinger was an exception, Nixon was an exception, Johnson was an exception. But usually Americans see a barbarian and say, how can we make inside every Saddam Hussein, there is a little Thomas Jefferson trying to come out, only he had a difficult childhood. So let us help him become an American as he wants to be. This is what they tried to do with Gamal Abdel Nasser in 1956. This is what Obama, in his unbelievable stupidity, tried to do with the Iranians. So the United States, under Obama, supports its worst enemy in the region and undermines its allies in the region. So, am I grateful for American assistance? Yes. Can I trust the Americans to be on our side when push comes to shove? Yes. Could I trust Europe? No. At least most Europeans? No. But can I trust the Americans? Yes. Should I listen to their advice? Only if I have to. For instance, we had elections in 2006 among the Palestinians based on the Oslo process. The Oslo process says Palestinians can participate in the elections if they accept the existence of Israel. So Hamas could not participate in the elections. So Condoleezza Rice, she was Secretary of State at the time, came to Israel and said, let Hamas participate in the elections in spite of the fact that they don't accept the existence of Israel. So we asked her why. She said because then if they participate in the elections, the Palestinians will not vote for them because the Palestinians want peace, so they will not vote for Hamas. So this will strengthen the Palestinian Authority. And the result, of course, was that Hamas won. The result today, if you bring together the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, the result is that Hamas will take over. Without the Israeli occupation in the West Bank, Hamas would be in power. When they asked the Palestinians, Khalil Shkaki, he's a very good pollster, Palestinian pollster, and he proved to be correct over a long period of time. He asked Palestinians what they think of the barbarism of the 7th of October. In the Gaza Strip, I believe it was 72%, but in the West Bank, the support for this barbarity was 86%. Okay? So, again, the idea, a two-state solution, okay? This is a fantasy. Would I like it? Yes. Would I? Here I'm exposing myself politically in Israel. I'm advocating for more than 50 years, getting out as far as we can from the Gaza Strip and from most of the West Bank. So it's not as if I don't want to get out of there. I'm eager to get out of there. But if we have a Palestinian state in the West Bank, and it will be independent, it will bring Iran 10 kilometers from Tel Aviv, okay? Because whatever the Palestinians have, they weaponize in order to kill Jews. You know that they weaponized even kites. They weaponized condoms. They took condoms, filled it with helium, attached bombs to it, and then the wind took it to Israel. They weaponize whatever they have. If you let them have the sovereignty in the West Bank, they will bring Iran there. Now, will it destroy the Palestinians? Yes. What are the Palestinians doing in the last 100 years? Destroying themselves.
It seems to me that there are Americans changing rhetoric a little bit. It was, I think, also mentioned by our president when he visited Israel, that there is, they don't speak anymore, it seems to me, officially about two-state solutions, but they say something like, we have to proclaim that there is a road to Palestinian statehood. Do you see a difference in this? Like, that West, led by US, supports Palestinian statehood in the future, or as we are on the road to Palestinian statehood? Is it a difference between two-state solution and a road to Palestinian statehood, or it's not important?
No, not really, but you see, I know what the mechanism works like, and I just mentioned it concerning Hamas in Gaza. First they say, the Americans are a party to the Oslo Agreement, so we say Hamas cannot participate. And then they come to Israel and they say, we want Hamas to participate. And then Hamas wins, okay? And we allow the participation of Hamas only because of American pressure. So first they tell us, we will not do it, and then they do it, because they have a vision. And they want their vision to come true. And then they cheat themselves. They don't even cheat us. They cheat themselves. As if, you know, well, it's not perfect, but we are on the way. We are not on the way. We are not on the way. Can the Palestinians change? Yes. Have the Palestinians shown in the last 100 years a willingness to abandon their concept, A, that the Jewish state is illegitimate, and B, that killing Jews is the only thing that gives you honor and respect and money? No. This is what they have been doing for 100 years. By the way, I think Israel is stupid. I think that instead of saying no, we should have said, you Americans tell us that you will have a Palestinian leadership that will be not corrupt, not educating their children to kill Jews, and not financing terrorism. And I would say to the Americans, okay, with this delegation, we will negotiate Palestinian statehood. Bring us this leadership. There is no such thing, and there will not be such thing in the near future. I don't know, later, perhaps. Pigs may fly.
But it's an understandable condition. On the other hand, to an extent, you are quite dependent on the Americans, financially, in military aid mainly. Can you not listen to them if they simply
No.
want to know what the end game is?
We listen.
And even the end game, in, as you say, like it was a caricature in Iraq, whatever, okay, Afghanistan, but isn't it quite legitimate a question what after, because the goal of Israel is to eliminate Hamas, to defeat Hamas in Gaza, but after it happens, if it happens, so what's the end game? Like, isn't it a
There
legitimate
is no
question?
end game. Look,
That's what I want to hear, yeah.
there is no solution. Again, I don't know if you know this restaurant near the castle here in Prague. There is a restaurant called The Flying Pig. Now, can pigs fly? Yes. All they need to do is to have a diet and grow wings. When they are 150 grams in weight and they have 2.5 yards of wings, they will fly. Can I see feathers on the back of pigs somewhere? No. Can the Palestinian change? Yes. Have cultures changed? Look at Turkey. In 1 century, twice they had a cultural change. Look at South Korea being a democracy. It is a dramatic change. Zionism is a cultural change. So it's possible. The problem is that people assume that if it's possible, it is absolutely inevitable. And if the change comes, it must be positive. I'm sorry, changes are sometimes negative. The most important change in Arab political culture in the last 100 years is radical Islam. It is not a positive change. Do you have positive changes in the Arab world? Yes. In the United Arab Emirates, they're trying to educate their elite to tolerance. This is very positive, and I hope it will develop. But you must empirically look at the Palestinian people and ask yourself, if they behave like subhuman barbarians, why in the West Bank do they have 86% who support it? Okay? And can you assume that these people will come to the negotiations tomorrow morning and willing to accept the state of Israel and not being corrupt and not educating their children? They're not willing not to educate their children to kill Jews. They insist that this is their national right to educate their children to kill Jews, which is what they do. This is the Palestinian education system. Okay? So, do we have to listen to the Americans? Yes. Do we have to accept sometimes what they tell us? Yes. But when it comes to existential issues, then Israel said no in the past, will say no in the future. For instance, we worked against the will of America in 1981 by destroying the nuclear plant of Saddam Hussein. We even had sanctions. President Reagan, a very favorable president to Israel, delayed the supply of F-16s to Israel in 1981 for 2 weeks, I think. So nothing very serious. When it comes to what is really important, the Americans, let me give you a specific example. The Americans now tell us, in a way that I think is unbelievably stupid, you're not allowed to have a perimeter, namely a 1 kilometer along the border where the Palestinians are not allowed to enter. Now, if we don't do this parameter, then the people living next to the Gaza Strip will not come back to their homes. If this happens, it's the end of the existence of Israel. Okay? And we will do it with the Americans or without the Americans. But it will be less effective because the Americans are standing in our way. And again, not because they're hostile, but because they're almost always wrong. Because they suffer from terminal optimism. They constantly believe that everybody is an optional American. All you need to do is to help the barbarian, and then doesn't he want a better life? And their perception of a better life is a house on a hill with 2 parking places and children into universities and having a good job and so, the thing that we consider a good life. But they assume that everybody, Hamas wants this kind of good life. No, the good life for Hamas is killing a Jew. This is what gives them a good life. This is why they are so happy. This is why when they behave like barbarians, they take the pictures. I mean, it is not Israeli cameras that clandestinely, they were proud of decapitating babies. They were proud of burning families alive, okay? And they wanted everybody to see it because this is what they are about. And then their own society supports them. Now, is every Palestinian a terrorist? No. But does the overwhelming majority of the Palestinian society support terrorism? Yes. And by the way, it has nothing whatsoever to do with occupation. This was in 1929, this was before Zionism, after Zionism, before the British mandate and after the British mandate, before the establishment of Israel and after the establishment of Israel, before the occupation of 1967 and after, before Oslo and after. This is what they do for 100 years since they exist as a people. Will we convince Americans? No. They will have their, will we get our way? 80%? Yes. We have it in the past. We are having it now, and we should be very mindful of the fact that the relationship between Israel and the United States is not unilateral. In other words, it is not only Israel depending on the United States. Now, is it symmetric? Of course not. Do we depend on the United States much, much, much more than they depend on us? Yes, but if the Americans want to get out of the Middle East in order to pivot to Asia, as they should be in the China Sea, okay? If you want to leave the Middle East, who will you leave the Middle East to? Who will struggle against radicalism in the Middle East? A combination of Egypt, Saudi Arabia, and Israel.
Okay, that's what we always wanted to ask about, like the future of all these Abraham Accords, and if it's to be
This is the most important issue.
And also, since you started to speak about it, I will follow on it and then Schueftan will ask. But one of my favorite writers, you definitely know him, Edward Luttwak, compared currency to, was trying to write something positive, right? Like, so he compared the situation with previous wars, with all this UN voting about ceasefire and this and that. He says that like, what is most important for Israel, that what is happening in diplomatic corridors with the US and with Arab, important Sunni Arab countries, that in diplomatic corridors, not on demonstrations in Berlin or London, you have quite cooperation and some interest to think about the state of affairs after the war. And he was quite hopeful that all this cooperation could be renewed after the war is over. So, you probably read the article, or
no? I don't.
Anyway, but
I'm delighted that this is what he wrote.
No, I mean Mr. Luttwak, Edward Luttwak, American writer, wrote it. He writes about.
But you're right. This is the most important thing.
Yeah.
The question is not what will happen with the Palestinians. They will continue to be violent. They will continue for the foreseeable future. Maybe later things will change. They will continue to be violent. They will continue to be irresponsible. They will continue to whine. This is what they have done, and I don't expect anything else. But you're right. The most important thing is what will happen regionally. Now here is the interesting paradox. The harsher we are in Gaza, the better our relations with the Arab world. The destruction of Gaza, that is a byproduct of this war, because if every home is full of weapons, if every home is booby-trapped, then the byproduct is destruction, because the only way you can fight against barbarians who put their weapons in their children's cribs is to come to their homes, because this is where they keep the weapons, and this is where they shoot from, and this is where they booby trap. So the destruction in Gaza is not only a byproduct of Israel defending itself, it is also a good message to the Muslim Brothers. Because if the Muslim Brothers can behave like barbarians and get away with it and get the support in Arab public opinion by killing as many Jews as they want and therefore getting this great public support, then if they can get away with it, Egypt is in trouble, Jordan is in trouble, Morocco, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, because the Muslim Brothers are the big enemies of stability in the Middle East. They are the worst, if God forbid, the Muslim Brothers take over Egypt. You have a regional war again with Egypt leading it. So the Arab states in the region, most of them, not only tolerate Israel, they need Israel. Okay? So they're in a position where they know America is much more powerful than Israel, but Israel is much more trustworthy than the United States. So if they want to defend themselves, they need Israel. Let me give you an example that few people understand the depths, the historical depths of it. Now that the Germans bought the Arrow system, Berlin can be defended from catastrophe with a Jewish weapon. Think of it in a perspective of 80 years. We start with the Germans killing Jews, and we end with the Germans being dependent on Jews to defend themselves from nuclear catastrophe. So, in the Middle East, the problem used to be, will the Arabs do Israel the favor and willing to recognize it and accept it? Now we are at a phase where the Arabs, in order to defend themselves, need Israel because it is both powerful and reliable, not as powerful as the United States, but much more reliable than the United States. Because you can always get another Obama with a profound misperception about everything. This is the worst president the United States had in foreign policy since the Second World War. And the people in the Gulf are afraid that America will behave like that again. In the beginning of the Biden administration, what was one of the first things he did? He removed the Houthis from the terrorist list. He put enormous pressure, coming back to your discussion before about pressure on Israel, on Saudi Arabia to stop the war against the Houthis. What is the result? The Houthis, like the barbarians they are, attack all ships in Bab el-Mandeb. Okay? You want to deal with barbarians, don't try to be nice to them. Destroy them. Okay? There is no way of appeasing the Houthis. So, when even Biden tried to appease Iran in the beginning, you remember with Rob Mali, and now the Iranians are killing American soldiers, and maybe the Americans understand a little bit better after the Houthis and after that what is going on.
You have already mentioned Iran, because Iran is kind of the elephant in the room we are talking about, right? Because they are supporting not only Houthis and Hamas in Palestine, but they are supporting actually many terrorist groups across the Middle East, both Sunni and Shia. So what can we do about this?
First of all, Iran is the only country in human history that I know of that has a global terrorist network. Wherever you are, there is an Iranian terrorist expecting orders from Tehran. Only recently, they had 2 dormant agents in Sweden that they now use to try to kill the head of the Jewish community in Sweden. The Iranians tried to kill the Saudi ambassador in the United States. in a restaurant in Georgetown, okay? In South America, in Asia, wherever you are, the world is full of Iranian terrorists. You never had a country, not Nazi Germany, not Soviet Russia, had terrorists all over the world, okay? So, whatever is bad for this Iranian regime is good for civilized human existence, okay? Wherever you are, Iran is threatening civilization. And Europeans don't understand it. Iranians want to dominate the Middle East, to hegemonize the Middle East. If they can have on their side Arab oil, the international shipping passages, and Mecca and Medina in the Middle East, they will become a major world power. This is what they're trying to do. If this is what they become, Europe is in danger, okay? And what is stopping Iran more than anything else? Israel. It should be the United States with Israel. It is Israel with assistance from the United States, okay? The more important responsibility, the understanding that Iran is an enemy of civilization, not just an enemy of Israel or of the United States or of Europe. Iranians threaten everything that you can possibly consider positive anywhere you are. And they're more or less saying so with their actions. Israel has a problem because the Americans believe you can appease Iran. Certainly Obama, also Biden, and nobody knows about Trump. Okay? Trump doesn't know about Trump. Okay? So it could go either way. Trump follows his instincts. Sometimes his instincts are very good. Look at the Abraham Accords. Sometimes his instincts are terrible. Look at the attitude towards Putin and Russia. Okay? But you don't know because he doesn't know. You cannot make a prediction because this guy cannot think strategically if his life depended on it. He is insulted by certain things, he is encouraged by certain things. You don't know where it will go. But it finally depends on the United States. And look at the even broader picture. Look at the United States vis-a-vis China. The United States is not defending the world against a Chinese takeover. And, you know, when the Americans speak to us about the two-state solution, I told my friends in Congress in Washington recently, the United States should have a two-state solution, a Republican state and a Democratic state. They're so polarized, they don't speak to each other. You know, a Republican and a Democrat senators came to see me together when I went to Washington. They made me swear not to tell it to their own parties because it would destroy the Democrats. The Democratic Party knew that he came with a Republican senator and vice versa. Okay?
Yeah, but speaking about the polarization of society, our society before the war was equally polarized, still inside it is. Now most of the society supports the action in Gaza, elimination of Hamas certainly, but is it still holding this support because it is existential, or is it, do you feel it starts to become undermined, like with some parts of the society being emphasizing more hostage situations and liberation of hostages?
You mean
above elimination of Hamas, or is support of Israel society for the way current whatever emergency war cabinet is doing it, is it still holding the overall support, or is it?
Let me start by making a broader comment and then to answer this question. If I would have to give a grade to the Israeli behavior in war, I would say 8 out of 10, which is not bad. And we're doing it without a functioning government. What is unbelievably strong is the Israeli society. So actually, we are doing quite well without a functioning government. The divisions in Israel, which in the beginning of 23, people were saying Israel is on the verge of civil war, and I kept telling everybody, you don't understand what is going on. It is only on the surface. We have an unbelievable level of solidarity of the Israeli society, much more than I would have expected. And people don't understand the distinction that is very strong in Israel, and I will explain it in a way that you may think funny. I once saw a very dumb film, but it had one great line. A mother says to her daughter, you know I love you, but I don't like you. When I look at the Israeli people, I don't like them, but I love them. And this is the attitude of most Israelis. Will they disagree and shout about practically everything? Yes. Do you have more solidarity in Israel than I see in any other Western society that I can think of? Yes. Is the Israeli public behind this war? On a very, 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 very high level. I would say something like 80% would agree on practically everything, and others would disagree. Again, not Arabs, okay? When you look at public opinion polls, Arabs and Jews are on completely different scales. But if you look at what makes the Israeli society, which is Israelis without ultra-Orthodox and without Arabs. The ultra-Orthodox don't serve in the army. They're not part of my solidarity circle. And the Arabs are basically, they're afraid of Israeli public opinion at the moment, so they're not active, but they basically are with the other side. But if you look at what made Israel, what is Israel, what determines what Israel is, namely the Israelis with these two exceptions, they are very much united behind the war, and they will say one thing and support the opposite. They will say the hostages is the most important thing, and then when they have to translate it, they will translate it in a reasonable way, saying, is it very important? Yes. Are we willing to make concessions for it? Yes. Will we get the hostages at any cost? No. At the cost of stopping the war? No. At the cost of the destruction of Hamas? No. Okay? So you're not supposed to say it. But practically speaking, Israelis say, we will not stop the war. Will we pause for a reasonable deal? Yes. But will we accept the dictate of Hamas of stop the war, get out of Gaza and let us come back? No way. And since I'm delighted to say that Hamas is very radical in its demands, then I'm not afraid of what is about to happen, because if we will get a kind of deal like the deal we had, say 20% worse, it will not be as good as the first deal, I will be for it, okay? For a pause of a few weeks. But a deal of all the hostages for the capitulation of Israel, which is what Hamas is demanding today, and there is no other deal on the table, Israel will reject it. And as long as this is not possible, then the war goes on and we continue to do what we need to do, namely to kill as many of them as possible. We killed 10,000 terrorists approximately, okay? And by the way, the ratio between terrorist and collateral damage is much better than in any other country that was fighting an urban war. So anybody who wants to criticize us will, of course, know that we're not perfect. We're only better than anybody else ever, okay, in this kind of war. And if your question is, as I understood it, are we getting softer on it? I don't think so.
I still had some questions, but we're running out of time actually, so we should really focus on the most important. Your best estimate. How long is the ground operation going to take? Because we've heard different estimates, and I know it is quite difficult to put a tag on it. But what's your best guess?
Look, the only question that is now crucially important is in the north. Because on the one hand, we cannot initiate an all-out war with Hezbollah.
Sure.
A, because it will bring about enormous destruction in Israel. And B, because what we will have to do with it will be very problematic for the United States, because this will put in danger the possibility of a major war with Iran, which involves the United States, and Israel cannot draw the American people into a war that the American people doesn't want. This will be the beginning of the end of our relations with the United States. We are not allowed to draw America into this kind of war. But whereas we will not initiate an all-out war in Lebanon, we are willing to risk an all-out war in Lebanon. In other words, to say, we will push the north of the border. You want to make a war? Make a war. But we will push it militarily. We are already doing it. We are bombarding places who are 30 kilometers, 50 kilometers from the border, and we are waging a war against Hezbollah's presence in the south. So, not initiating a war, but risking a war in the north. In the south, the question depends very much on our ability to reach an agreement with the Egyptians. Because we and the Egyptians have the same interest vis-à-vis Hamas, but Egypt must be very careful vis-à-vis its own public opinion domestically and in the Arab world. So the question is, can we reach some kind of modus operandi with the modus vivendi with the Egyptians, so that we can do in Rafah not everything we want to do, but 60% of what we want to do in Rafah. In terms of time, I would expect the fighting to last for months. To have a guess, I don't know, between 3 months and 6 months. Okay? This is my estimate, but again, so much depends on what is happening in the north. But let me make one comment that I don't want this program to be without, because it gives the framework of the whole war. This war is crucial for Western civilization, because the real question that is at stake: can civilized people defend themselves against barbarians, even when the barbarians put their weapons among their children? And basically what most of the world is telling Israel: this is a war, war brings casualties, stop the war, the casualties will stop. And to me, it is similar to coming to the United States in 1943 and saying, stop the war. I mean, this war kills millions of people, stop the war. If it would have stopped the war, Hitler and Stalin would have won. Or, if you want, and I think it will resonate here in Prague, some people are so stupid that they say, stopping the war, preventing the war is the most important thing. Somebody prevented the war in 1938, okay, in Munich. He prevented the war. Only to have it erupt a year later. So, war is a terrible thing. It is not the worst thing. The worst thing is capitulating to barbarians. And Today, Western society must ask itself, can we let the most fortified position ever in human history defeat Israel? Gaza is the most fortified position ever in human history because it is not only the missiles and the weapons and the tunnels, it is also the New York Times and Amnesty International and Human Rights Watch that is defending Hamas, okay? By saying, stop it, you're killing people. So we must prove that we can destroy this terrorist base, including the attempt of so-called human rights organizations to defend this terrorist base. This is not their intention, but this is the objective outcome of their attitude. So Israel should not stop the war before achieving a very, very large part of its objective. There is no such thing as absolute victory. This is a fantasy, okay? It's good for political use or something. We will not eradicate Hamas. Palestinians are Hamas, okay? You cannot change a culture if people don't want to change a culture. You cannot make a rapist into a philanthropist, okay? Because he wants to be a rapist. And the best psychologist or the most developed system of rewards and punishments cannot change people who don't want to change. And I don't see the Palestinians wanting to change. I would be delighted if I could be wrong.
So my final question, and again I'm asking your estimate, your guesstimate, as the Americans would say. What is the risk of a great war in the Middle East? As you already mentioned, no one actually wants it. Israel doesn't want it. The US doesn't want it. Not even Iran probably wants it right now. But you know how it is with wars. No one wants it until it happens. So if you should, again, put a tag on it, what's the percentage of a bigger conflict there?
It really depends on the Iranians and on Hezbollah. And my guess would be now 70-30 against an all-out war.
Okay.
But remember, as you said, things don't happen because people wanted it. I mean, the 6-Day War, nobody wanted it, not even the Syrians and the Russians, certainly not Nasser, certainly not Israel, certainly not Hussein, okay? And it erupted. The First World War, who wanted the First World War, okay? But I think now the stakes are very high. I think the Iranians understand that even if it will hurt Israel, it will also devastate Beirut. I mean, our message to Hezbollah is, you see what we've done in Gaza? You want it in Beirut? Okay, go ahead. We are, from an Israeli point of view, we live in a region, perhaps that's a good way of ending our discussion here. The difference between the kind of assumption that the three of us have and that I have in Israel, in Europe, in the United States, and what we have in the Middle East is that in the Middle East, if they're not afraid of us, we should be afraid of them. Because the option that we have developed in pluralistic societies of live and let live. Okay, you do your thing, I do my thing, as long as it doesn't threaten my existence. I don't care what you're doing. This is totally alien to the Middle East. So, unless they're afraid of us, we must be afraid of them. Peace, even between Israel and Egypt, rests on the understanding of Egypt that Israel is not only very strong, but also willing to use its strengths. We now have to demonstrate, and we have demonstrated, and we continue to demonstrate, that if we must, we can be very nasty. Because being nice is life-threatening in the Middle East. You should be nice when you can and nasty when you must. And we are now proving that when we must, we can be nasty. And if they're not afraid of us, they'll come to kill us. There is no other option. And if they can get away with what they did on October 7th, then October 7th will come very soon. Another one.
Okay, can I ask one more last question? Shouldn't Israel, I know we are at war, so technically it's not very much possible at the moment, but at least politically, rhetorically, be more supportive of Ukraine in general?
Yes, I think that we have, in the past, I was for the very cautious attitude of Israel. I think now we should be more supportive, and I think there are ways, and you know it as well as I do, to help on a low profile, to give real help on a low profile. And I agree that it is time now. Particularly against the background of the relations between Russia and Iran. We still need to be very careful, but there are many things we can do still being careful.
Okay, thank you. So, thanks a lot. And I would like to thank our guest, Professor Schueftan, and I would like to ask our listeners to be faithful to us, and you will have a chance to see us at some next occasion, our next conference or discussion. So thank you very much. Thank you, Schueftan. Thank you, Professor.